Welcome to the School of Hard Thoughts podcast, and we are not. Oh, yes, we are. It's coming up so slow, I couldn't tell. I love Adobe Audition, by the way.
Who are you?
My name's Adrian.
What's up, Adrian? I'm Green.
Hi, Green.
Good to meet you.
Oh, all right, you meet me.
Again and again and again. Every time I meet you, it's great. Thanks for tuning in to our post-Thanksgiving edition of School of Hard Thoughts podcast. Hopefully you guys had a great turkey day.
Yeah, I did. Except my wife had to work.
So did I.
Damn you, corporate America.
Well, and not even, it's without, okay, I'm going to use your disclaimer. If you're my employer or possibly former employer, go ahead and turn it off. Because it's not just corporate America, it's a lot of America does work on Thanksgiving because for some reason the machine just never stops. Its appetite is never satiated. What are you going to do?
I don't know. But speaking of businesses, again, we want to thank, as always, Famous Sam's at Golf Links and Kolb in Tucson, Arizona. 7129 East Golf Links Road. The best place in the world that I've ever been at, and I've been all over the world.
Yes, you have.
To watch
all around the world.
All kinds of sports, especially football. They have the NFL Sunday tickets. They have all the games, every Sunday, every Thursday.
Our good buddy Frank is in here, and they'll find a Seminoles game just for him.
I don't even think Frank's ever been to Florida.
No. But I tell you what, he knows every damn stat of that team.
I know. He's a Florida State fan. He's a Boston fan. He's never been to Boston either. But that's a whole other conversation about.
I like the Broncos, and I like the Broncos, and I've only been to the Denver airport and some dispensaries around.
We're not going to talk about the Broncos because by the time this comes out, the game will have been over, probably. And that's my father-in-law's team, and the Steelers are playing them on Sunday.
Oh, this will be fun. I'll come in tomorrow, and we'll wear opposing jerseys.
Watch you and him gang up on me.
Yeah, but you're probably going to win, so.
Probably,
yeah.
But I don't know. We're like on a 6-game winning streak, so it's, just like baseball. It's like when a guy's like on a 0 for 6 batting, tear, it's like, oh, he's due.
That's why I always
like a grand slam.
Like Adrian said,
we're due for a loss.
Like Adrian said, we're coming at Tucson, and I'm a huge Arizona Wildcats basketball fan, and I prefer, before the field of 64 gets chosen, I prefer the Cats to lose a couple games because statistically, you have to win all those games, and to come out of a winning streak and carry that.
It's hard to maintain that. That's why, like, the teams that, there were a couple Patriots teams that were like, 16-0.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, they're gonna, beat the mind.
They're never gonna lose again.
Yeah. Their fuckers are gonna lose in the first round. But
so we talk about all kinds of things on this podcast.
We do.
And sports is probably the least talked about, but we do care about it. Today we got a couple of other things to delve into. And I did some of my homework this morning.
Good for you,
Professor Ace. And if any of my old teachers are out there listening to this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Sitting there scrawling the homework as they're going up and down the rows, like, oh, Mr. Kaywood. And I'm like, I'll get it to you by the end of class, Mrs. Burson. We're going to be talking about the validity of social media in the current political climate, current friendship climate, and how it's affected it.
Yeah, and that's the entire reason this podcast started, was that we were talking about conversations that we were having at this bar with each other about politics and society and social issues and the varied opinions that come out. And, you've got a lot of people that speak narrative, and, I was guilty of that myself.
For sure.
The ability to do that and then, buy each other beer or root for the same football team.
And I need to work on that and not ostracizing myself from people who have subtle differences in opinion. I tend to have moments, not over a long periods of times, but I have moments where I take things too serious.
Yeah, well, if you see me on social media quite frequently, and you've seen some of the epic battles I've had with a gentleman that you don't know. It goes by the moniker Jimmy Mack.
I actually, and if you're out there listening, I apologize, buddy. I know I engaged with you a couple times, and it was rather visceral. And
yeah, but see the thing about Jimmy, this is what happens with friends, is that I know Jimmy. Jimmy's a tough, grizzled, old school,
sure,
urban police officer. Well, retired now, but
his opinion is informed by things I will never see or experience.
And he's basically, like we talked about last week, he's basically a good person.
Sure.
Definitely on the complete opposite side of the spectrum from me.
Sure.
But definitely somebody I always respected. And there's this thing that makes everything political or social or differential go away, is that when you have someone that, regardless of your race, your sex, your sexual orientation,
political leanings,
your sports team, it doesn't matter, you get on that radio and scream for help, they're coming running.
Amen.
And that was the kind of relationship I had with Jimmy. And the kind of relationship I have with a lot of people who, some of which, I can't even have on social media anymore.
Sure.
Because, it's kind of sad for me, because one of my great mentors, my first FTO, taught
What's
me.
an FTO?
FTO is a field training officer, so he's
okay.
when you're a rookie cop, they don't just put you out there with a
here's a gun,
here's a gun,
here's a gun and a badge.
Go out there and
here's a gun and a badge.
Enforce the law.
Go
there,
shoot some meth heads. Yeah.
Go ahead, Murphy. You'll be fine. Which is exactly what they did with Murphy.
I'm just thinking.
Did you notice that?
I just see you as like an Axel Foley. I can see you as the Axel Foley of Delaware.
Racist as fuck.
No, yet well, it's only half racist.
Probably true, but anyway, yeah, it's so my field training officer is a guy who's very intelligent, very thoughtful, kept me out of a lot of trouble. I almost shot him once.
See, I've had that with friends, and I've never even been a cop. So
no, he actually saved the guy's life, because the guy was coming at us.
Yeah,
we weren't on the call. Somebody else was on an armed robbery call.
Sure.
And then units in the area get a description of the suspect. This guy fits.
So you have to be on alert, even though that's not your particular beat. You have to be on the lookout for this stuff.
So we're in this alleyway, and this guy fits the description to a T, and he's coming at us. And what I didn't know, and what my partner didn't know, but he kind of surmised, was that he was hard of hearing. He wasn't deaf.
Sure.
But he didn't hear very well. So we were screaming at him.
Yeah.
Like, put up your hands, put up your hands.
We really don't want to shoot you today.
And, right. And so, I've got him in my sights, and I'm just like, screaming, and partner screaming.
Right.
And he reaches back, but he's reaching for his wallet.
Oh.
He reaches back for his wallet, and I remember, because I was a rookie, so we were still, this is like 1990.
Okay.
So in 1990, we were still carrying revolvers.
Right.
So I remember seeing the cylinder turning on my weapon, because I was pressuring the trigger.
Sure.
I was about to pull on him, and Kevin walked into my sight picture because he just tackled the guy.
Damn.
And it turns out that it was a poor guy that was hard of hearing and didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And just wanted to show. He's like, here's my ID. I'm a
Sure.
good guy. And,
yeah. Well, maybe not a good guy, but definitely not the guy in question.
No, he actually, he turned out to be definitely not the guy in question. And we don't know. He didn't do anything wrong.
Sure.
Except not obey our commands, and it's kind of hard to obey commands that you can't hear.
Right.
Although visually, two guys are pointing guns at you.
You might want to stop and not move.
But regardless, Kevin did the right thing there. He kind of tackled the guy, and that's one of the reasons I didn't pull the trigger, is because I see this tall, skinny white guy crossed in front of my gun sight, and it's like. But anyway, we kind of learned from that, and we kind of learned a lot of things, and most of the things he taught me in that situation, I kind of taught him. I was like, dude, I was pulling.
Right.
I was like, we gotta communicate better. I was like, and at that point it was like, sir,
sure,
respectfully.
Yeah, respectfully.
So respectfully, and he was like, no, you're absolutely right. We got to communicate.
Well,
better.
because a gun and inertia and physics do not care about
but he taught me so much, and we covered each other's backs, and things that he taught me about police work I still use, like in being a paramedic, in life, and he has become this, at least on social media. He's got kids and he's got a wife and he's got a family, and I'm sure he's taking good care of them, and he's a good guy there. But he lives in Florida now, so I don't ever get to see him. The only thing I got to see from him was social media, and some of the things that he put out were just all but to the point of racist, and I was just like, I can't.
And this is what we want to talk about today.
Right.
Is how do you engage people that you have had previous to 2016, previous to Facebook, previous to MySpace, previous to social media. Relationships, meaningful relationships with these people, and then all of a sudden we're all instantly, consistently connected without ceasing.
Right.
There is no turning off the 11 o'clock news anymore.
No. We have the wealth of the world's information at our fingertips, and what do we choose to do with it? We choose to argue with each other about topics we probably don't completely understand.
Well, and we argue semantics, and when we're not doing that, we're sharing cute cat videos and
antics, like Animaniacs. Oh,
we're zany to the max. But it's become this instant connectivity, which I do not think is necessarily healthy, but it's not going anywhere for the time being until a huge solar flare, a coronal mass ejection from the sun fries all of our satellites, and we're stuck to navigating by the stars again, which will happen, I think, in my lifetime. It will happen. We're going to have to reboot all those satellites at some point. But in the meantime, we do have to learn how to get along with each other in this new kind of social space. Because social space is no longer, I disagree with this person, but I'm in line with them at the grocery store, I'm just going to be polite. Now these people are in your pocket all the time. They're in your face when you're trying to go to bed or when you're watching a commercial.
There's that buffer. There's that electronic buffer.
What do you mean? What buffer?
If you think about it, if you're at a bar and you're having a conversation with somebody, or you're at the family dinner table, we talked about it. I talked about Thanksgiving, and there's always the drunk liberal uncle that's spouting off his conspiracy theories or whatever,
right?
And everybody's like, oh my god,
chemtrails,
right? Exactly, flat Earth,
anti-vaxxers,
or whatever, and
it's another one.
Those are physical spaces. So if you're at a bar and you get in a disagreement with another person, that physical space is smaller, and there's a chance for a physical confrontation.
I see.
As opposed to people who I call keyboard warriors,
yes,
who will get on social media, and you don't know if they're expressing their true feelings or they're trolling, or and that's a whole other subject that we need to get to. But you don't know if they mean what they're saying, but they say some incredibly inflammatory things.
Sure.
That if you were standing next to me,
you might get a kidney shot.
Yeah.
Or at least like hey, what the fuck, man?
Yeah,
like
right. You would get confronted about it.
Right.
And the way we confront each other on social media is type furiously and put the caps lock on.
I love doing that, and we'll get into what a troll precisely is. But I love doing that. I'm like, hun, your caps lock's on. Okay, hun, do you know how to do this? Is this your first time interneting?
I think those people though are endearing to me now. They used to get on my nerves, but people who don't know how to internet, they're just so nice. They're nice people. It's just like it doesn't matter whether they're older or younger.
Yeah.
They're not. It's like that commercial where the ladies are putting clippings on the wall, and she's like, that's not how this works. That's not
how any of this works.
But, there's no arguing with each other, and there's no,
Okay, so let's
you kind of miss that about the world.
So let's dive right into that, because it's something that I think most people who are listening to this podcast have experienced are trolls. and not the little furry guys back in the 80s and 90s with the cool hair that the teacher used to take away from you, or that your great aunt uses at the bingo hall. She's like, rub the troll hair before he calls the number, not after it. Afterward does me no good. Trolls are, in my opinion, people who don't necessarily agree or disagree with a specific circumstance or a platform, but just like to stir shit up.
Oh yeah, they're not there for. Well, there's obviously there's several types of trolls, but yeah, the basic troll is.
No, you're talking to a former dungeon master, so there are more. There's, I mean, okay.
Yeah,
anyways, sorry.
There's a myriad of trolls.
There is.
But yeah, you're looking at someone in this instance that you're talking about is whatever you say.
Right.
Whatever side of an issue you take. If you're a Red Sox fan, then automatically they're going to talk about how good the Yankees are and their 27 championships. You know, if you're talking about supporting Donald Trump, they're immediately going to, talk about
Clinton, Obama,
yeah,
whatever.
Right, exactly. And
or vice versa. Yes.
And that kind of segues you into the professional trolls, which, it was a very big concern for us in 2016 and continuing concern. And,
paid trolls.
Yeah, well, paid, not only paid, but organized by, allegedly organized by the Russian government. So,
so the fear of the Russian government has been around since what?
Since the Russian government?
Since
right after World War II.
There's no more country called Persia. I don't know.
Right after World War II, because they were our allies for a while.
Sure. Well, and they did have some big wins during the Axis and Allies,
Yeah.
But so did Winter.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
And a couple of these Ruskies knew how to hunker down.
And that kind of always surprised me from a historical perspective that weather did play such a big role, and we were on their home turf.
Well, here's the thing. Weather did play a big role, but the Russians we're segueing into a little historical lesson here.
Right. That's okay. That's a podcast for both.
The Russian army was used to dealing with these kinds of elements. They knew how to gear up. They knew what to eat, what to drink.
Right.
The German forces at the time had been marching probably for about 48 to 60 plus hours straight, being fed amphetamines.
Yeah. So
they did not have a high
any knowledge or ingrown instinct that you have is destroyed by your fatigue.
Well, and that's
the
thing.
Fact that you're
they weren't making, and thank goodness for that. Honestly, but they had nothing but the sheer power of will, which if you look at some of the old Hofbrauhaus speeches, that's one of the things that one guy with the weird mustache used to talk about, is like, no, we can overcome everything by the sheer power of will.
The one guy...
with the asterisks of also methamphetamines.
Yeah, so the one guy that on social media, as soon as you get in an argument with somebody, you immediately compare them to? That guy?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that's...
Not personally me.
That's one of my least favorite things is comparing anybody you don't like, no matter how bad they are, to Hitler. I mean,
I'm not a big fan. I honestly never do that.
Hitler is a serious.
That's a serious shit
level. That's a serious level of evil.
And I don't even compare any of the modern princes. No, not even him. And that guy doesn't even have a motherfucking pulse.
He's more fucking Genghis Khan anyway. He wasn't necessarily evil per se. Like, he wanted to exterminate anybody. He just kind of wanted to own everything.
He just he just wanted his dick inside of everything on the planet.
Like he took Manifest Destiny to the extreme.
Personally. He was charged by whatever deity he believes in to just go out and conquer.
Yeah.
But no, I also do not like the comparison to Hitler so easily. I do think there are comparisons that can be made, maybe in policy.
Yeah,
but as far as being like, oh, they're just like Hitler. No, they're not.
And the problem with it being overused so much is that when there are good comparisons to be made, it's like, oh, here you go with the Hitler shit
it takes
again.
away the actual severity of the comparison.
when people talk about fascism and some of the things that are happening with Donald Trump, the fact that nationalism, and the fact that he admires dictators and he admires
salutes North Korean officers.
He admires President Xi from China, who just decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to be leader for life.
Yep.
And the people were like, okay, that's cool.
Yep.
And that he was like, yeah, we should probably do that here. It's like, what are you talking about?
China is what? Communist, right?
Right, but we are not, and that's
funny because so many anti-Trump people are labeled as communists because they are socialists. Or they agree with socialism.
Or they're really communists. Remember our talk with Zara. Zara was like, I was actually trying to mitigate for her, and she was like, hey, you don't need to.
She could handle herself, yeah.
You don't need to. I do consider myself a communist. I'm like, oh, okay, sorry.
Then do your thing, girl.
Do your thing, girl.
Sure. And honestly, if you've ever actually, besides just listening to what your grandfather and great-grandfather said and done some research, on paper it works. It's just when people get involved.
Right. But my argument to that has always been, well, isn't that with any system? Because it's all about corruption. Any system gets corrupted. I mean, if you look at our system is, if you look at that beautiful document we call the Constitution.
Sure.
And the checks and balances, and the way that the founders gave us to amend the Constitution to kind of keep up with the times, and the way that we have used case law to make constitutional decisions. If you look at that, and then you look at what our government has become, basically, if you are a fan of George Carlin, it's like the corporations really own everything, and the politicians are just kind of figureheads.
Well, and I believe that's how it's been probably, and everybody blames Reaganomics for that. I think that was a manifestation of something that was already happening.
Yeah.
I think the corporations really started getting in there. World War II was huge for many things.
It was. It demonstrated to us that going to war can be profitable.
Absolutely. And what ended up happening was, while these brave men and women were out, doing their duty, preserving our freedoms, making sure that things didn't go to absolute hell, you still had a population that wasn't fighting.
Right.
And that population got marketed to, because they found out, like you said, that you can market empathy. You can market feelings. You can tug on these heartstrings.
And more than anything else, you can market fear.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. The love of your brother, the love of your mother and father. Holy shit, we can make money off this.
Yeah.
And then they just started drooling, and that's where I really think it started happening, was this whole American dream kind of veneer of 2-car garage, a bunch of chickens in a stock pot, 4.5 kids, church on Sundays.
Wow, I'm pretty sure it was 2.5.
Well, I don't know where you're coming from. I don't know where you're from.
Are you sure you're not Mormon? I mean,
I'm a quarter. But you know what I mean. My figure, I don't have my stats right in front of me right here. But you know what I mean. You get the idea of what I'm saying. There's this prescribed dream that you have to follow.
Right.
And for you to achieve this, you have to go through this kind of Candyland loop of, okay, first you have to pass through employment and college, and then now you got to...
First you have to be white and male.
Yeah. Well...
Before anything else,
as a white male, yeah, you're right.
Sorry, brother.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's funny because there's been on social media, there's been this uprising of like, well, it's getting hard to be a young white male. I'm like, wait. Listen, guys, and as a young white male, not young, but not old, middle-aged white male, maybe it's time to acknowledge that we can't just go around sticking our dicks in everything. Maybe that has come to an end.
It worked for Christopher Columbus.
That's what I'm saying. He was an Italian. which I have family members that still, those ethnics, those
Forget about
Italians.
it.
Anyways, but yes,
Yeah,
you know,
so we were talking about trolls, and so the other type of trolls.
I actually might
were-
be after this diatribe. I might be one now. But trolls, they come in a couple of variety of fashions, and I derailed you. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, and what the fear with Russia, which we just gave a brief, probably completely inaccurate history of.
This is the internet. No one cares. No one cares, Ace.
But yeah, that was what they did. They had troll farms, and they used fake articles and promoted posts and made posts that were designed to have American people have conflict with each other.
So inflammatory.
They were very inflammatory, yeah. Inflammatory to the point where I forget what it is, but it was 31 of them were indicted,
Oh, wow.
for...
I didn't know about that.
That was one of the first things Mueller did. One of the first tangible things that Mueller did was...
Right.
I have to look up the number. The real number escapes me, but all these the Russian operatives, he
exposed.
he exposed and they're indicted. Now, will they ever come to justice? Probably not, because they'll never come to America.
Well, no, I mean, you can't. I don't. Guys, see, that's the thing with cyberspace and the new way we communicate. The litigiousness, the legal beagle kind of side of it is still so in a gray area.
Yeah, I have a.
And can you extradite? Can you extradite for being an asshole on social media and
Right.
fucking with our?
Messing with our election?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you or can't you? It doesn't. It's really.
We're in areas where there's not concrete laws.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
It's funny, and even in areas where there are concrete laws, it's kind of murky. I have a friend who she lives in Spain, and she has been in the United States a few times on a visa for medical reasons.
Okay.
And that's how we met. And she wants to come to America to be a citizen.
Oh, she wants to emigrate over
Yeah,
here.
she wants to immigrate. And she got involved in some kind of scam.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that where they would like, oh yeah, we'll get you this done. It'll take 6 months, and you'll give us, $3,000, and
Like a citizenship Groupon kind of special.
right.
Oh man, that's a bummer.
And as intelligent as she is, she kind of bought into it, and she wrote me a letter, and she was like, look, you're a retired police officer. This is what happened, and she explained it to me in detail, and I asked a bunch of questions, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to help her because
Which exact laws have been broken?
Right. The business had a U.S. address, but it was like, is this a matter for the for the police in that state, or is this FBI, or is this Interpol? Because
Sure.
And I said, well, what about your credit card company? And your credit card company was like, well, basically, fuck you.
It's a legitimate
So,
company
yeah,
that
right,
charged
yeah.
a charge that
So-
you willingly paid them.
Yeah, you willing to. So, there are levels of scams. They're just out and out scams that are completely illegal.
Sure.
And then there are scams that it's like, hey, we're saying that we're going to offer you this, but if you read the fine print, we're not really offering you anything.
Like a timeshare.
And yeah,
Like timeshares. Sorry.
yeah. So it is a area of the law that even for things not as complicated as international, espionage to influence elections, it's incredibly complex and hard to understand.
Do you think it falls underneath? Okay, so here's a good question.
I think what you're about to ask me is it an act of war? And yes, I think it was an act
I
of war.
wasn't, but now I am. That's so much better than what I was going to ask. Oh my gosh. School of Hard Thoughts. Adrian is coming at us with both. I dig it.
I think about this stuff a
That's
lot.
good.
And it's
Is it
without jumping to conclusions, obviously, and being open to change my mind.
You are a very open-minded individual. I've seen you change your mind before.
Yeah, and being open to change my mind, I normally can kind of grab a hold of something and go, yeah, that's what that is. That's that's a cat.
Right. Right. Right.
It's I can
You can see something for what it is.
Right, I can see something for what it is, and I'm sorry, interfering in our elections and doing it on purpose and having your government do it and being successful was an act of war.
I think if this would have happened in any other era prior to 2000, then it would have exactly been considered that.
Well, I think even if we had a different administration, it would have been considered that.
Well, and there we go.
But
we have an administration right now that seems, I'm not going to say endorses, because I haven't seen them outright endorse, but they seem to be sympathetic.
Sure he did.
Hang on.
No. During the campaign, he was like, hey, Russia, if you could please hack Hillary Clinton, that'd be great. That was
that's right.
That was a fucking request.
I forget that not everybody is privy to my internal monologue and or dialogue at some point. I don't really consider 45 part of the administration.
No, he's not even part of the human race. He's just fucking nuts.
And again, I'm not anti-Republican or anti-Democrat. I think a bird has two wings, and they're both part of the same bird, to use a Native American proverb. But I think he is a figurehead that is being babysat by real people like General Mattis and the Ninth Circuit Court. I think what is happening right now is that a large portion of America, not the majority, but a large enough portion that could really make a problem, are being placated. Yeah, kind of spoon-fed. Okay, here you go. Here's your Agent Orange skin tag motherfucker of a person that you guys kind of like. Fine, don't go out and shoot up the Piggly Wiggly.
Thank the founders for the separation of powers.
Absolutely. They did have foresight, believe it or not. That's why it's called the Great Experiment.
Yeah.
They didn't even know if it was going to work back then.
Right.
Okay?
No.
When they made the Second Amendment, that wasn't for Joe Bucktooth in fucking Oklahoma in his compound to take down Abrams or an F-30.
Right, and
the Second Amendment was made so the burgeoning American government at the time, which did not have a standing army, could arm themselves and citizens that agreed with America against militias from England, from the Dutch.
It was not a political move.
No. And you know who always has stood by us, and we crap on them all the time now, is the French. We crap on them all the time, but they've been with us.
Shit on the French.
They've been with us, and they cook so well. They cook so well. Their buildings are so ornate. They got such a long history.
I don't know why we shit on the French. But
there's a lot of
maybe 1812.
Hey, nobody has a perfect history, man. Everybody gets drunk a night and fights a friend.
Yeah. And so, that brings us back to fighting friends.
Yes.
So,
social media, trolls. Why are we fighting each other so much, Ace?
Well, if you look at some of our leading scholars, two gentlemen, Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber, who are PhDs in philosophy, they said they have a theory and a paper that came out in 2011 that talks about the human brain and the development of logic and reason, not for what we think it is. We think logic and reason is there to make us reasonable, to make us, find out things and be able to figure out problems and cooperate.
Yes.
They say that we developed logic and reason to argue with each other.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
no wonder these guys are in philosophy.
Yeah, it's a very interesting paper, and it's well received in the philosophy community and the psychology community, that maybe we are looking at things wrong, because you look at a word like reasonable, like I just used,
sure,
and it means something that maybe it doesn't mean.
So the way I understand evolution is an organism, whether it's physically or behaviorally, will evolve if given resistance. Okay, so if you have a hard time defending yourself, after X amount of time, you will develop a way of defending yourself, either physically or behaviorally.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily disagree with these philosophers' statements. I do think that it's important to have discourse. I do think it's important to disagree, because variety is the spice of life, and an organism becomes more adapted to its environment, and a more hardy type of organism, the more environments, the more adversity it's capable of dealing with.
Well, that brings me back to your U of A bias. And two professors at the University of Arizona who we would love to have on the podcast, and I have already invited via Twitter to be on the podcast, but they talk about arguing about politics online might actually not be a bad idea. They talk about being able to get through to people that you love and care about with good ideas or differing ideas.
I'm looking at some data right now, and it looks like since the advent of social media that it has increased the discourse about politics exponentially. You're engaging, and people are researching more than they ever would have.
Yeah, if you're referencing the Pew Research study.
Correct.
I think that's from 2014.
No, I'm seeing some data from 20.
It's pretty recent.
Yes,
but it's a very extensive study, and one of the things that is absolutely certain is that social media has increased activism. So there's a difference between political arguing and actual activism. So it has facilitated people being able to find like-minded individuals and form groups with them, and
it's made
go
it
to
very
political rallies or have demonstrations, or and I mean, you've been on Facebook. There's groups for everything.
Yes.
There's groups for atheists. There's groups for people who don't want to have kids. There's groups for people who like to garden. There's all kinds of groups, and social media has made that possible. And one of the most important side effects of that has been allowing people to be participants in the political discourse and actual activism, actually getting out there and marching and,
So when I was in my early 20s living in Washington State...
5 years ago.
Shut the hell... Oh, you're a sweetheart. Oh, my goodness. That is wrong. This was about 15 years ago-ish. I was living in Washington State, which is a very liberal state, no state income tax. It's a state-controlled liquor board. That's how they get around state income tax. The state keeps all the money from hooch.
Right.
Which is actually a brilliant idea.
Pennsylvania does the same thing.
Okay.
They call it state stores.
Yeah, liquor stores.
Yeah.
Closed on Sundays. Better plan your weekend, folks. Plan your weekends and
Gotta go to the
holidays.
state store. Yep.
I was very into Hunter S. Thompson, Kerouac, William S. Burroughs, very much on not a destructive, but not
Slightly
constructive.
anarchist.
I was very kind of anarchist, but definitely trying to make my own way and screw the rules and just kind of following. I never did heroin, but I certainly read a lot of people and admired a lot of people who did a lot of heroin. So, at any rate, me and my friends would go to these Democratic caucuses for local and when John Kerry was doing his presidential election, which I actually ended up voting against after going to some of these Democratic caucuses, though.
Right.
And it was so easy to show up. I mean, we would go in fairly lit, but we would all put on suit jackets, and we would just go to local shops, like a Famous Sam's, if you will, or the local Winchell's Donuts, and be like, hey, we're collecting any kind of donations. We're going to
Talking about food again.
We're going to a Democratic caucus. Could you you have anything to donate? And they'd be like, oh, sure, yeah. And you would be amazed at the amount of free things you can get if you're like, hey, we represent A or B side of a political platform. What side are you on? If you're with us, oh man, we got like 4 dozen donuts and a couple crates of coffee, and we show up to this.
Bribery's always worse.
We show up to this
politics.
Democratic caucus, and all they did was talk about stuff that they had already done and admonish each other for what had already been accomplished.
Like
it was just backslapping nonsense.
Yeah, it's
and it
one
jaded
of the things,
me, and that's why it was very eye-opening for me to see that happen.
Yeah, that's one of the things, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly, but because I work, or at least used to work in emergency services, one of the things
I'm calling you before I call 911, by the way.
Don't do that. Call 911. Tucson Fire and Tucson Police know what they're doing. Don't call me.
I got friends that work EMT. I'm calling you first.
Don't call me.
I don't want Steve-O showing up at my house.
Anyway. No, but like it's one of the things, and Anderson Cooper kind of brought it out during one of the plethora of disasters that we've had, was that all these politicians jumping up on the microphone and thanking each other.
Yeah.
I want to thank Governor such and such for having me here while everything else is fucking burning.
Right.
And it's okay to thank like the volunteers and the first responders, but normally it wasn't about that. It was like, I want to thank Chief, so and so
for developing this policy. I can't wait to see you at the dinner tonight.
So you actually. In the past 5 years or so, you see less of that because it's being taught out of public relations and emergency management.
But what I was going to say was, at that point, there was no social media. There were cell phones, but they weren't what they are today.
Yes, there was social media.
Yeah, there was.
There were message boards.
And that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm about to get to. There were. The social manifestation wasn't what it is today, but you did have to work a little harder to find these groups.
Dial up.
Exactly. Well, not just on the actual technical side of it.
Take a cab.
But you had to work, and you had to actually talk to people, and you had to go somewhere. You had to be present at an event, at a function, at some public library at 9 a.m. with whiskey in your coffee and a copy of Hell's Angels in your pocket.
And the word of mouth had to be real word of mouth.
Absolutely.
As opposed to what the Pew study has shown is that on social media it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to put up an event, and get people invited to it and make a hashtag for it that there's a viral.
The thing is now with these trolls, and obviously that's the theme of today's podcast. Evidently, before social media, before the kind of social media we have now, you had to be much more charismatic. You couldn't just be this keyboard warrior, which I love that term.
Yeah, but it's gotten me in a lot of trouble by calling people keyboard warriors because people know what I mean when I say it.
But what I'm saying is you couldn't just crap all over everybody and expect any kind of fruit from that harvest. Up till recently, you had to be charismatic. You kind of had to be like a politician, like with a smile on your face, and go out and try to be non-judgmental to people. You had to really, because you don't know when you're canvassing, when you're talking to people randomly, cold calling people, you couldn't come at them with this whole like, well, I'm red, and are you red too, or I'm blue, or are you blue too? You had to be very open-minded. It was a whole different kind of character you had to carry yourself as, like a Kirby salesman or something like that.
And it is completely flipped because I get emails all the time, especially right before the midterms. I was getting 7 or 8 emails a day saying, hey, you're blue, you're a Democrat, you're with us, right?
Right.
You're going to vote for this person, right?
Right.
And then sometimes they would have these ridiculous polls. They were so.
I demand to know who conducted the survey.
There were so-called polls, and the answer there might be one answer. Yeah, do you think President Obama was a good president? Yes, and there's no other option. Like that's
Right.
not a poll.
Was Obama a great president or the greatest president?
Right, exactly.
Like,
and that's the way.
No,
it
that's
works.
it, and that's bullshit. That's not a good poll. You should have more freedom in expressing your opinion. But seriously, like today, people come at you so hardline, almost like I think everybody should have met an Army recruiter in the 90s, because those were the most slick salesmen ever. The Army recruiters in the 90s, pre 9/11, the military recruiters in the 90s, pre 9/11, were some of the greatest, smiliest, most charismatic people that you're like, listen, man, not only do I want to join the Air Force, but I want to take you to lunch. You're a great guy.
Exactly.
My goodness gracious, what a polite
And
military
trust
we
me,
have.
the 90s might have been like the peak of it, but it got me in '85. So
No, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, when war still had borders.
yeah, I mean,
Before you waged war, an
we
ideal.
talked about
Like,
that time. That time when I was a young man.
Yes.
Was the time between wars.
so like,
there were
5 years ago.
yeah,
Wait, between wars? No, you just dated yourself.
yeah, I did. I did.
So the trolls nowadays, it's almost like you said, they flipped. Now instead of being charismatic and like, "Hi everybody, I'm Jim Click and I'd love to sell you a car,"
Yeah, right.
it's which is a local
It's
car
the
sales
opposite.
guy.
It's like, hey, this is going on, and you should know about it. And if you don't know about it, you're stupid.
You're terrible.
And you're probably going to die.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
so sensationalist.
Right. It's the fear part of it. But back to that the University of Arizona study, or I think it's more research. It's Samantha Klar. That's Klar. I'm sorry, Samara. I'm calling her Samantha. Samara because maybe I watched the Ring movie and didn't want to say that word. But Samara Klar is one of the researchers that did some extensive research into social media and political activism and interacting with each other. And if you're out there, and I know you are, we're going to reach out to you, and we would love to have you on the podcast and kind of straighten out these two yahoos who are just kind of shooting from the hip.
We have some software and some microphones
Yeah, basically.
and a couple hundred listeners. So that's cool. But we definitely would love some professional people who actually did generate the data, who looked at and generated the data, who did the blood, sweat, and tears kind of work on this stuff that we are using. Definitely come on the program. Let's talk about this real quick, unless you wanted to wrap anything up.
No, I'm
okay. Who do you, after talking about all of this, after being like, yes, Aunt Flo freaking hates all people that aren't
Left-handed.
or born in this country, regardless of race, if you're born here, you're okay. But who do you keep? Who do you delete? And is blocking people a good thing to do for our social space or for your mental health?
It's actually been made easier for us because you can remain friends with someone and that's a whole thing. Our language has changed.
Correct.
Because a friend is not what a friend is anymore. You have multiple kinds of friends. Where before, one of the things I have carried throughout my life is that I have very few friends. I keep a small circle. Now that circle changes, but I always keep a small circle. But if you look at me on social media, I've got like hundreds and hundreds of quote unquote friends.
This is why we get along and do a podcast together.
Yeah, so it's even our language has changed about it. But we're talking about the social media friends, and it's become such a pervasive phenomenon that the social media platforms are making it easier for us. So you can still stay connected with someone without seeing the crap that they write. So you can unfollow them but still be their friend.
Sure, and still wish them a happy birthday
and you can
or
do the opposite as well.
whatever, yeah.
If there's somebody that you're not really particularly lining up with, but you're interested in what they're saying because you're either interested for strategic reasons, because you like to argue on the internet, and yes, I do like to argue on the internet.
Same here.
But or you're trying to open up your mind, you can follow them without being their friend, but not in all cases, because people can set their privacy to different levels. And then there are times where you just have to block people. You just have to block them, and I think that's an individual's choice, but for me, it's when it comes to the point where if you were in front of my face, I'd hit you. And especially that's especially difficult for someone who used to be close to me. So it's like, again, I'm referencing my mentor, my friend, my FTO, who, I love him to death. The first thing I would, if he walked through that door right now, I would hug him. But then if he said, some of the things he said on social media, I'd want to hit him. So it's kind of like.
When I can see the conflict in you, I can see you hit this 1,000-yard gaze really when you talk about it. No, I get it. I don't have the same history as you, but I do have a history, and I have experienced some of those things where it's. I have blocked a couple of people, possibly in a blind rage on Facebook. Oh, yeah. But if I were to see them, absolutely give them a hug, buy them a beer, kind of thing.
Yeah. The funny thing about that is, and we have all done it. You're going through your friends list, or you see somebody. You're going through your feed or whatever, and you look and somebody that you thought was your friend comments on something, and then you kind of click on their page and realize you're not their friend anymore.
Right.
And you're like,
because
when
of
did
how
that happen? Did they get me or did I get them?
Well, and especially nowadays, you never realize how fast time flies. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe this person changed. Wait, that much in 20 years. No, 20 years is a while. That's a lot of experience that somebody can have.
Half a generation.
And you can either garner positivity or negativity out of your relative experience. And that obviously affects who you are going to project yourself on social media. The thing that gets me is, even between good friends that don't see each other regularly, like you and I
we see each other regularly.
Pretty
we see
regularly.
Each other every fucking week.
Sometimes more if I get lucky.
Right.
Sometimes fucking more if I get fucking lucky.
If I get lucky, I don't come here.
Wait. Moving on. I think
just miss my wife. She's been working.
Yeah, I know, right? 'Tis the season. This anonymity of social media, even between well-known friends, because when you're commenting on somebody, you're not there looking at them. You're not there experiencing the same kind of situation. It could be so removed. This person could be coming off a shift. One commenter could be coming off a shift of 14 hours. It's 2 a.m. They're pissed. They see something, and they just flip, a comment on something.
Right.
And then you respond, at 10 in the morning after having a decent breakfast and saying hello to the wife and the kids and stuff, and you're like, wow, that's kind of
completely unreasonable.
Kind of uncalled for.
Yeah.
And I think this disconnect through connection is what's really screwing with the evolution of what I consider normal social space.
Well, part of it is I'm one of those people who admits that I talk to myself. I talk to myself all the time. And whether you actually verbally talk to yourself or you just have an internal dialogue going, we all talk to ourselves.
Yes.
And things that we used to say to ourselves, we are now typing out into long paragraphs on Facebook or 150 characters on Twitter or whatever,
Which is a fine device for mental. It used to be called journaling, and that's how people stay mentally healthy.
But the problem is sometimes the things that you say, you may mean in a visceral way, but don't come out the way you want them to, or you don't really mean it. You kind of go back and look at it and go, wow, I didn't mean to do that.
Sorry, y'all.
So the filter is kind of gone, where you might be in your car and somebody cuts you off and you're like, you fucking asshole.
Right.
And look, he's a Red Sox fan. What a dickhead. Where that was you in your car by yourself. Nobody knows
Right,
that you
right.
called that person a name,
Right.
And if we're now doing it in public.
And in front of the totality of all humanity.
Right, so that's why...
Because I've always had visceral, dark thoughts and been kind of, a nice guy on the outside, but inside I have my own, whatever,
Yeah.
brooding artistic anguish.
Oh, there
but
are
I used to keep it in
absolutely-
journals that nobody ever saw. I used to, song lyrics and just riffs and stuff like that
I
I used
rid of
to.
all my journals.
Same here.
Because I was single for too long.
think
so
a
it's
lot
like
of-
so much dirt in there. I'm like,
Yeah.
I gotta get rid of that.
Ceremonial fire.
I gotta get rid of that shit.
But that's the thing. Now, the upcoming generations, it's out there.
Right, and they're not gonna be able to get rid of it.
Well, and there again is that
Because you can delete something on Twitter, but you really can't delete something on Twitter.
is that a healthy stepping stone for our evolution as a species, as a social creature.
I think what we're going to have to do, because we're still kind of we're not in the infancy of it. I think we're in the adolescence of it, and it's something that we're
I'd agree
going
with
to have
that.
to learn to manage better.
Okay.
Just because it's such a great tool. It's such a great tool because, so at the same time we talked about, at the same time we talked about connecting with old friends, and that's actually was the first appeal of like Facebook. Was like
MySpace and
Yeah,
Facebook were about
right.
like, holy crap, I haven't seen you in 10 years.
yeah,
How the
right.
hell you
Or I went to
been?
high school with you, and
Yeah.
I had a crush on you.
Sure.
Or, I love the fact that you
We're
won the state
1,000 miles
championship
away, and
for
if
us.
we ever meet halfway, I'd like to fuck you or
I love the
something,
fact
yeah.
that you played pro basketball
Sure.
for one season, and
Right.
how are you? How
Yeah.
you doing? That type of thing.
And it was a hookup device.
MySpace was.
Yes, it was.
MySpace was just bad.
I've been married 13 years now because of MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace was bad. But the opposite can happen. So I want to talk about this incredible man named Brian Wright. And Brian and I are pretty much as far opposite as you can get politically.
Okay.
He's a born-again Christian.
That's okay.
He is a Trump Republican. He is just staunchly and completely right.
Unabashedly.
Yeah. But at the same time, he is a former paramedic who became a police officer and now is in medical school going to be a doctor. And we met on in the comments section of a post by David Brin, who is a science fiction author. If you know the Uplift Wars,
I do.
If you ever heard of The Postman, that horrible movie with
I love the
Kevin
cameo
Costner.
from Tom Petty at the end.
Yeah. It was a horrible movie, but it was a great science fiction book. David Brin is a very, very thoughtful, very smart man who thinks about our future, and we both happened to follow him, and we had some spirited conversations about things. But the thing I've loved about Brian throughout is that Brian argues with facts. Brian will say, this is why I believe this, and here's the study, or here's the article, or here are the facts, or here are the statistics. And it may or may not change my mind, but because we come from a place that is so similar. I was a cop that became a paramedic.
Right.
And I understand what he went through, and I understand what he's going through. And now the fact that he's, in medical school and he just had his first kid, I am so happy for him.
Well, how can
I
you
am
not be?
So, and this is a man I've never met.
Sure.
And so that is an amazing thing about the internet. I have a friend that I know. There are
That you
very
care
few
about.
people. Well, not only that, but there are very few people that you saw I don't know if you saw The Town with Ben Affleck. They're bank robbers.
I think it was on my
anyway,
TV at some point.
he comes in and he basically tells his friend, played by Jeremy Renner, and he goes, I need your help. We're going to hurt some people, and we can never talk about it again. And Jeremy Renner's answer is, who's driving? And there are people in life, very few people in my life, that I know that if I was in trouble or if I said, hey, we've got to go, this guy did something to my family. Are you coming with me? They,
Absolutely.
they would saddle up.
So for me, it's a more of a Jules and Vic Vega from Pulp Fiction. Like, yeah, we should have freaking shotguns.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but there would be no. They'd be like, yeah, of course, man, I'll ride with you.
And as much as we disagree, and the fact that we've never met each other, Brian is one of those people. And I just want to shout out to him. I don't know if you've been listening to the podcast. Probably not, because you're in fucking medical school and you just had a baby, so you don't have time for our
Right.
shit. But
Yeah.
I think that social media, when it pertains to politics, when it pertains to human relations, it has a lot of good and a lot of bad. And I don't agree with the Pew study. The Pew study says that everybody kind of thinks that a majority of people that were in that study, which was only about 5,000 people.
It wasn't that much. I think
Yeah.
it capped out at 6,000.
Yeah, it was like about 5,000 people, which is a small sample size, but also a decent sample size.
It's big enough to have a decent control variable out of, but it's
Yeah.
definitely not representative of the totality
Right.
of the volume of social media.
Yeah, so basically what the idea was that about a little bit under half said that it's just going to keep getting worse. And I don't think it is. I think we're going to grab control of it, and we're going to make it a tool, and we're going to keep the bad actors out as best we can. Because I mean, you can look at some of the things that the actual platforms and companies are doing. So if you have an Apple phone and you have iOS 12, there's a new feature called Screen Time, and it tells you every week how much time your face was in front of that fucking screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that a company that wants to sell you that fucking screen has said, we're probably in front of these screens too much. So we're at least going to give you a tool
to monitor your
to
screen
monitor
time.
your screen time, and that's kind of a counterproductive business model, but they were responsible enough, and there was a desire for it. It's not a counterproductive business model because people wanted it. People wanted it.
And they're willing to provide an amount of currency or what have you,
Right. And it cost them nothing probably
Right.
to make that
to
happen.
develop.
Yeah.
Well, maybe something to develop, but not something to support or distribute.
Apple and Facebook kind of both do the same thing. They just steal other people's shit and change it a little bit. And
Well, that's all art forms. As a musician, you can only do so much, but the same blues chords, you just change the lyrics and some of the rhythm up a little bit. But enough about my plagiarism.
I write, and
I want to
look back at some of my stuff and be like, "This is Blade."
Well, exactly. and
This
as
guy that I wrote is Blade.
as a musician, I was like, how many times am I going to try to write a Bob Dylan song?
Right. Yeah.
That's who I was. I was like trying to be this troubadour kind of folk guy, and I'm like, I'm just writing Bob Dylan songs. I need to figure something else out. We got to wrap it up here pretty soon, but I wanted to touch on the efficacy of the First Amendment in regards to social media.
Efficacy for $30.
Is that something that covers social media? Because social media involves people of all countries, people who don't fall underneath citizenship of America,
Right.
which we're the ones who have the Constitution and all the amendments therein. So when you have somebody from another country using inflammatory speech to incite a discourse, unproductive discourse, violent discourse,
What do you do?
are they protected under the First Amendment?
I think they are protected under the First Amendment, but only in this country. And so I think it comes down to the platforms themselves. So, there was a lot of talk by all of the, podcast hosts and YouTubers and all the people who do what we're trying to do about the deplatforming.
No, we're doing it, buddy.
Yeah.
What is this, episode number 9 or
episode
10?
8. This is
Oh, yeah,
episode
8?
Yeah.
No, we're doing it.
About the deplatforming of Alex Jones. And, there's a pretty big backlash with people like Joe Rogan and some others and from both ends of the spectrum. And I'm like, I don't get that. Part of the First Amendment and capitalism have always had this symbiotic relationship where it's like, you know what? The government can't come in and say,
this is what you have to say or
this
cannot
is what
say.
You can't or cannot say. They can regulate certain things on certain broadcasts based on whether children.
You
can
have
see them.
regulations through
Yeah.
the FCC because there are certain things.
FCC, you always-
There's certain things that you cannot say. The George Carlin 7 words that you can't say on TV.
But there's always a outlet to be able to say them.
Sure.
Like on this podcast, you can say "fuck" as many times as you
Right.
want to. But
say
and
fuck,
on
you
HBO, you can.
Sure.
Right. So, but there's always been the ability for let's say HBO that has a program that has a actor on it that went out on social media or went out and did something heinous, raped somebody, Kevin Spacey's an example, and people are allowed to go, you know what, I'm trying to sell my product and I'm one of your sponsors. And as long as you have that guy working for you, we're not going to be your sponsor anymore.
But that's capital
That's
navigating.
capital. Yeah, and we've always been able to do that, and it's never been a First Amendment violation. And what they're saying is, well, these companies have become so big that maybe they should be publicly regulated. Well, first of all, they already are publicly regulated.
Absolutely.
And second of all, again, it's Mark Zuckerberg's business. It's, him and his board of directors, so they can decide that they don't want Alex Jones
many
on their
people
platform.
forget
If
that-
Alex Jones wants a platform for his bullshit, which,
It is.
it comes down to that. But if Alex Jones wants a platform for his bullshit, then maybe he needs to come up with his own platform.
He needs to come up with his own platform, and so many people who take or maybe don't realize what Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are. They are business models
Right.
meant to make money.
Yes.
They are not
And collect
SEC
your information.
They are. Well, that's the big thing. That's the huge thing. Is why do you think?
Data mining is.
Why
the
do you think
entire
on your
reason
device
for everything?
Why do you think on your devices you see things that you think about? Because
Yeah.
these algorithms aren't only gathering your data; they're gauging and predicting your behavior
Right, and they're all connected
day by day, and it's
They're
all
all
one
connected.
huge biocomputer that lives underneath Virginia, about half a mile underneath it. It's this huge Metroid brain.
Not a conspiracy theory at all.
It's a huge Metroid brain that's spraying chemtrails and putting autism in vaccinations. See, like right there, First Amendment.
Put the autism.
They put it right in there.
Stored somewhere at Langley.
And I have autistic friends and relatives, and there's nothing. I honestly
Yeah.
don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think we understand it. First of all,
No,
we don't understand what the brain is or what it's doing. And some of these young people.
Bill von Hippel, who's a evolutionary psychologist, I believe, and I'm sure I'm fucking up his title, but that's okay. He's a smart guy that knows stuff.
Yes.
And he was talking about that people, we don't know how to teach these people. It's not about. In fact, actually, it wasn't von Hippel. It was Eric Weinstein.
Okay.
And Weinstein was saying, these people that we call special needs or retarded or autistic or whatever.
Right, whatever word we use.
They're not the problem. We're the problem. We don't know how to teach them. They're actually smarter than us.
That's exactly right.
And
That
I
is
think
exactly right.
that's what ultimately. And this is another podcast, but I've
Yes.
always wanted to talk about what you think, and maybe we'll have somebody on as well. But what do you think anthropologists from, say, 500 years from now are going to look back and say about us? I think one of the things is they're going to be like, wow, they really thought autistic people were disabled.
Well, and our hesitancy to evolution, our hesitancy to progression of ideas, we're so lockstep in stuff that's been around for the last 300, 400, 1,000 years. We're still kind of stuck in the same routines, and I completely agree with you. But
I'm just realizing you're a fucking southpaw.
I'm left-handed, man. But I play guitar right-handed.
I know a lot of guitarists that do that.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that?
So my manual dexterity
Left-handed
lies.
guitars are hard to find.
Yeah, they're twice the expensive.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just be another Hendrix.
Right, you didn't want to be Hendrix and flip it upside down.
Just another Hendrix from McCartney. You know what? Those flash in the pan guys. They were around so quickly.
Here's the thing I never quite understood. He flipped it upside down. Did he have it restrung?
He could do it either way. He went both ways. And now, bam, man, holy crap! This will have to be another podcast because there is a link between musical genius like Hendrix, Lennon, McCartney, Ravi Shankar, Beethoven, and autism, and non-traditional thinking patterns. Yeah. But we've been in your guys' ear for about an hour 10 now.
In your face.
And we're going to wrap it up with saying that the First Amendment does cover your right to say stuff.
Yeah.
But you can't just go out and incite riots.
Right.
You can't incite violence.
Right.
And I know this sounds basic to me and you, but I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Well, I think what happens is people have a business model. People have their own interests that they have to protect. So they think that way. They think with their, it's one of the papers I was reading. It's protective reasoning. So and so a guy like Joe Rogan has a podcast where he says whatever the fuck he wants to.
Sure.
And he actually knows Alex Jones. I'm not sure if he would call him a friend or not, but he's an associate.
He's had a steak with him or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
He's had a beer with him or whatever. He's had him on the show. So to him, it's kind of like, why are you shutting up my friend? Well, your friend's a fucking dickhead.
And your friend went up to survivors and parents of shootings and said,
"Hey, that never happened."
Come on,
your dead
man.
kid was a hoax.
Yeah, come on.
So,
I mean, you do have. Okay, so let's put it this way: you do have the right to free speech, but reality has consequences.
Yeah, it does.
There's consequences to what you have to say, and you did have the
To
right.
me, it comes back to that physical space thing.
He's not
because I almost have this like fantasy of a world where it's like, okay, you're allowed to say whatever you want, but like that person that you're talking about has to be right there. So the parents of those kids that you're saying died in a
false
hoax.
flag bullshit.
Yeah, fine. You can say that shit with their dad right there and see if he doesn't beat your ass.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. He's free to say that, but reality is free to execute consequences upon him.
And that's why I think that the quote-unquote deplatforming of him is not a First Amendment violation.
I don't think so
it's
either.
Not
because he already said it. And he can stand on a corner with a cardboard sign and shout that shit all day.
He could start his own network. He could.
He's not in jail for what he said.
Right. Exactly. And that's
that's what I'm saying.
Right. And that is such a good point. The First Amendment isn't a business.
No. It's a right.
It's a right. So yeah, you can't. I can say, I want Donald Trump to be impeached and go to jail, and if he killed over and died tomorrow, I would applaud. That would piss some people off, and it might have the Secret Service check on me,
which they are,
which they're not, because people say that kind of shit all the time. But I'm allowed to say that without the king's men, without the Secret Service or some kind of.
It's not like Saudi Arabia where you're not allowed to sing on the streets or something like that.
Coming in and grabbing me and then taking me somewhere in a public square and beating me or cutting my head off.
Right.
That's what the First Amendment's about.
Exactly.
It's not about going around willy-nilly and being able to say things that
are libelous or something like that,
or just heinous, and then having the platform that you're using going, you know what, you can't use this anymore. Sorry.
Exactly. They didn't prosecute him. They didn't take him out
No.
like the Salem witch trials and have him publicly stoned or anything like that. They just said, "Hey, we can't use you anymore, man. Sorry." And
Yeah.
his sponsor said the same thing because it is about capital. It is about money. It is about sponsorship. And
Right.
when you piss off a majority, then your sponsors are going to pull out.
Right, and
happened with
there's
Bill
also-
O'Reilly.
There's also moral lines that you just, to
Happened
me,
with-
you can't cross.
But it
You know.
happened. I mean, not just Alec Jones, which is your kind of fringe. I'm using this very loosely. Journalists, but your Bill
He's a
O'Reillys,
fringe personality.
your Bill O'Reillys, some of your other talking heads that came across some problems, and maybe
And
that
Bill
wasn't.
O'Reilly's doing just fine. I
And
think
it wasn't,
2 weeks ago he had the number one best-selling book.
wasn't necessarily a free
He's
speech
fine.
issue with him, but a lot of these guys use the First Amendment kind of as their nurse. You know,
Right.
like, oh, well, no, I got my First Amendment here with me, and I gotta, y'all just trying to push me down in the dirt. No. We're not putting you in jail. We're not hanging you
Right.
in the gallows. You can say your shit, but just, you're not going to get Coca-Cola sponsorship for it anymore.
And you're not going to be able to do it on Twitter. And
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do it on...
Because that is a
you know,
business model.
Right. You're not
All
going to
right.
be able to do it on Facebook.
So there is a difference between rights and business.
So take that, Joe Rogan. Please don't hurt me.
Yeah, he knows how to hit. Joe Rogan, I loved you in.
I do.
What was that?
With Kevin James?
No.
Yeah, he was in a movie with Kevin James.
Yeah,
where he
I know,
actually
but the
danced
one-
with Leslie Bibb, who was very hot.
The sitcom he was in with Phil Hartman.
Oh, yeah,
and,
News Radio.
News Radio. Joe
Yeah.
Rogan, I've been a fan of you since News Radio.
Yeah,
I thought you were great back then. I think you're great now. Just
He's my favorite primate.
just maybe have some steaks and whiskey with some nice guys once in a while. That's all. Ace, what else you got today, buddy?
I miss my wife and I'm hungry, so
Same here. I miss my wife, and I am also hungry. This has been School of Hard Thoughts, and we love you guys. If you have any questions, any answers, any thoughts that are hard from school, give us a shout out on our Facebook, on our Twitters, on our Instagrams. Give us an email. Come on down to Sam's on a Saturday morning and be polite to us, and we'll be polite to you.
yeah. And again, Dr. Samara Klar, we're calling you out. We think your research is interesting, and we would love to have you on the show. And you're from the U of A, so
Just down the
Green
street.
will be over here having a fit.
I'll be getting her autograph
Exactly.
on a Michael Bibby card.
And I'll be asking you some tough questions, and you'll be teaching us. So, and also my friend Larry DeLuca, who's a emergency physician, has agreed to come on the podcast. We just don't know when. But Larry has some unique perspective on not only medicine but also politics, because he had his 15 minutes of fame
Sure.
in the political realm. So
And I have a couple friends, Donna and Corbin Gravely, who are the owners and purveyors of CrossFit Purgatory, going to be on the show pretty soon, talking about CrossFit, dispelling some of the negative stuff, and talking about all the great stuff that some of these gyms do. It's not just all extreme stuff. They actually have a really cool lifestyle that they foster all different types of oh man, I'm spacing it. They foster all
Health
kinds
and
of
prosperity.
health and prosperity, mental areas, and they do yoga. They're just really great
check,
people,
please.
and we need to bring them on the show. They softly agreed to be on the show,
Sweet.
and now I'm calling them out. They're gonna have
Call
to
them
show
out.
up here pretty soon.
Yeah, call him out.
Alrighty,
All right. So Green, thanks for today. And
Adrian,
Tracy, I love
it's always a blast. School of Hard Thoughts. Make sure and give us a shout out. Share us on those social media. We love you.
Okay, and you have to go turn off YouTube.
Oh, again.
I mean, if you want to press this button, you can press this button.
We need to start getting professional so we can get a studio guy for this.
Thank you very much for listening.